The sea had been calm that morning, and I thought the gods had granted us a moment of peace. Then, as the mist thinned over Hakata Bay, I saw them, black dots upon the horizon, growing larger with every heartbeat. At first we thought them merchant ships, but soon the wind carried a strange drumming, deep, foreign, relentless. By midday the truth struck us. The Mongols had come. Their banners fluttered like dark wings, and the glint of iron covered the sea. I remember the silence that fell over our ranks. Even the gulls seemed to vanish from the sky. I was a vassal of Lord Takazaki Kaga no Kami, a minor retainer, young and untested. My heart burned with the pride of serving our shogun, but when those ships drew near, pride turned to trembling. I had seen drawings of the barbarians, squat faces, long bows, armor of hide and iron, yet nothing could have prepared me for their order and their number. They came in ranks, each ship bristling with men, as if the sea itself had given birth to an army. When the first ships reached the shallows, their warriors leapt into the surf without hesitation. They shouted words none of us could understand, and a terrible thunder answered, explosions that split the air. We had never heard such a sound. Smoke rolled across the beach. Men clutched their ears and screamed as fragments tore through armor and flesh. Later we learned they used iron shells filled with fire, the Teppo, the thunder bombs of China. I watched a man beside me fall without a head, his body still twitching, his blood hissing in the wet sand. I tried to remember the teachings of my father, to meet death without fear, to draw my blade as if cutting away all doubt. But my hands shook so hard the hilt felt like ice. Around me our warriors shouted the names of their ancestors, urging their horses into the shallows, trying to push the invaders back. I joined them, screaming though my voice broke. The Mongols met us not in single combat, but as one body, shields locked, spears thrusting in unison, drums beating the rhythm of slaughter. Our arrows struck their armor and fell uselessly. Their own bolts hissed back, cruelly barbed. I saw one of their horsemen loose 3 shafts before my sword could swing once. They fought not for glory, but to kill swiftly. There was no duel, no honor, only the roar of command and the stench of blood. I felt the weight of centuries crumble within me. All that we had been taught of valor turned to dust before their iron discipline. When dusk fell, the shoreline burned. The Mongols set fire to our watchtowers and slaughtered the wounded where they lay. I crawled behind a shattered pine, half blind from smoke, clutching my sword as if it were prayer itself. The cries of men and horses echoed through the night. I could not tell which were human. I thought of my home in Tsukushi, of my wife weaving by lamplight, and for the first time I begged the Buddha for deliverance, not victory, only breath. By midnight the tide carried their dead back to shore, tangled in broken planks and banners. The air reeked of salt and blood. Some of our warriors whispered that the gods had turned their faces from Japan, that the end of the age had come. Yet when I looked upon the burning coast, I felt something else, not despair, but the heavy stillness before a greater storm. When dawn broke the next day, the sea was crawling with ships. They filled the horizon like a swarm of locusts. I remember thinking that the ocean itself had turned against us. From the hills above, Hakata, smoke curled upward from burned farms, and the air reeked of salt, ash, and death. The shogunate banners still fluttered along the coast, but our lines had thinned. Men who had fought through the night now stared blankly toward the bay, their armor blackened, their spirits hollow. Lord Swenager summoned what remained of our mounted force. He rode before us, his voice hoarse but steady. We fight so our names are not forgotten. The words struck deep. I followed him down the slope toward the beach where the enemy had landed. We thought to reclaim the sand with our blades, but the Mongols were waiting. Their drums pounded again, and with every beat volleys of arrows cut through the air. It was not war as we knew it. They advanced in perfect lines, archers behind spearmen, spearmen behind shield-bearers. Each step measured, no hesitation. I remember seeing one of our best horsemen charge straight into them. His sword flashed like lightning, but before he could strike twice, they surrounded him. A dozen spears pierced him at once. His body sagged from the saddle, his armor gleaming wet. We shouted and surged forward, only to meet the same wall of shields. I struck at one man's face and heard the crack of wood against my blade. His companion's mace smashed into my shoulder, and I stumbled back, gasping. The pain burned like fire, but I refused to fall. Their weapons were strange, short composite bows that bent like horns, blades curved inward, shields painted with monstrous faces. They shouted in unison, their cries echoing over the surf. Whenever one fell, another took his place. We fought from morning until the sun stood high, yet the tide of men never ceased. I could feel fear creeping through our ranks, not the fear of death, but of facing something beyond our understanding. As the day wore on, the Mongols began hurling small clay bombs from their ships. They burst with blinding flashes, showering sparks and shards that tore through flesh. The explosions sent horses rearing and men screaming. I covered my head and prayed. The noise was like thunder trapped within the earth. Later, when I opened my eyes, the shoreline had vanished under a curtain of smoke. Only the drums remained, and the cries of the dying. That night, the Mongols pulled their forces back to their ships. Some said they feared a counterattack. Others whispered that their supplies were running thin. I crept along the dunes and watched them by the moonlight. Their campfires flickered across the decks, and I could hear their voices, strange, guttural, almost like chanting. They ate, laughed, sharpened their blades. They looked not like men weary from battle, but like hunters waiting for dawn. Behind me, the survivors gathered among the ruins of our fortifications. The priests walked among the wounded, murmuring sutras, while the sea carried the bodies of our comrades back to the sand. I knelt and washed my sword in the tide, watching the blood spiral away. The salt stung my wounds, but I took it as a sign that Japan herself demanded our offering. As I gazed toward the dark horizon, I swore that if the Mongols returned, I would stand again. Yet in my heart I feared that no man's courage could stop them. That night the wind began to rise. At first it was only a murmur, like monks chanting beyond the hills. But soon the sea grew restless, and the sound of the waves turned to thunder. I lay awake among the wounded, the taste of ash and blood thick in my mouth. Somewhere beyond the dark, the Mongols were anchoring their ships along the bay, their fires still glowing faintly through the rain. None of us knew what would come next, only that the sky itself seemed to shudder. By midnight, the heavens broke open. The wind howled down from the mountains and tore through our camp like the wrath of the gods. We clung to the ground as trees snapped and roofs were carried into the night. The sea roared louder than war. I could not see the ships, but I heard their cries, faint at first, then rising with terror. A sound not of battle, but of drowning. The next flash of lightning showed the bay in chaos. Masts bending, ships colliding, flames whipped sideways by the storm. We watched helplessly from the cliffs. Even the bravest among us fell silent, for it felt as though heaven itself had drawn its sword. The priests began to chant sutras to Hachiman, the god of war, thanking him for this divine wind. I too bowed my head, though part of me feared what it meant. To see one's enemy destroyed without the stroke of a blade was a strange kind of mercy. I thought of the Mongol soldiers, fierce men who, like us, had wives and sons, and wondered if they prayed in their own tongue as the sea swallowed them. When dawn came, the storm had spent itself. The world was grey and still, as if washed clean of sound. I walked down to the shore and found the beach littered with wreckage, splintered hulls, broken shields, and bodies tangled in seaweed. Some were ours, most were theirs. Armour of lacquered leather, curved sabres, arrows still clutched in pale hands. The waves rolled in gently, as though ashamed of what they had done. Among the survivors I found a single Mongol, barely alive, clinging to a broken plank. His lips moved soundlessly. I could have struck him down. It would have been easy, but I did not. I pulled him from the water and laid him beneath the driftwood, covering his face from the wind. He died moments later. For all their cruelty, they had fought with courage. The storm had shown us that men on both sides were helpless before the will of the sky. The shogunate's messengers soon arrived from Kamakura, bearing word that the invasion had failed. They said the gods had sent the kamikaze, the divine wind, to protect our land. In the temples, bells rang through the night, and prayers of thanksgiving filled the air. Yet among the warriors, few rejoiced. We had seen too much death to call it victory. I felt not triumph, but exhaustion and a quiet shame that our salvation had come not from valor, but from the storm. When I returned home weeks later, my wife met me at the gate. Her eyes filled with tears, and she touched the scars on my hands, as if confirming I was real. I told her only that the sea had spoken, and that I had lived to hear it. Even now, when I stand upon the cliffs and watch the horizon, I sometimes think I hear the echo of those drums, faint and distant, carried on the wind. Perhaps they will come again one day, but if they do, may the gods remember us as they did then, and may the wind rise once more.